Hello, this is Skylit Lake reading Super Science by That Chicken Dude. Chapter 15, Protection. Thank you for seeing me despite your busy schedule, Professor Egon. Professor Cephalopod thanked his employer as he sat at his seat across his desk. Accompanying him was Dr. Orpington. Sitting at his desk, Egon waved him off and graciously told him, "Of course, Professor Cephalopod. Now, what was it you wanted to show me?" Accompanying him was Izuku, who was asked by the octopus to join in on the reveal, and Pete, who was eating out of a food bowl by the edge of his office desk. Octo stood in his seat and started to explain. "Now, I'm sure you're very aware the one thing this facility lacks is security. Now, don't get me wrong, cameras, locks, silent alarms, and bulletproof glass are all well and good, but with what we're doing, we need to be creative on how we hide and protect our assets. Catch them with their pants down, if you get my meaning," he told them while pacing back and forth. Getting tired of the theatrics, Egon signed and prompted him firmly. Yes, just tell me what you've made." The professor hops off his seat and skittles over to an object covered in a sheet that he had brought in. Grabbing it and ripping it away, he announces, "Presenting the Mew Cutie." Sitting there was an ordinary lockbox made of standard grey metal. The sight of this did not impress either Egon or Izuku, who looked more disappointed and exasperated. "A metal lockbox?" Egon observed while shifting his glasses down to glance at the professor. "It's much more than that. Go ahead, put something in it." Izuku and Egon looked at one another, shrugged, and Izuku picked up an empty food bowl from Pete, bringing the bowl over as the dodo honked in disapproval. The box suddenly sprang open with a mass of teeth and a long tongue snagging it and swallowing it whole. After licking its lid, it burped. Egon sprang from his seat and scooped up Izuku, pulling him out of the perceived danger, while Pete honked in fear and ran under Egon's table. "It's alive!" he yelled, making a realization, and asked Otto in a small voice, "It's alive?" To which Otto nodded. "How did you make this?" Izuku asks as he hides from the living box from behind Egon. "I mutated a culpral taxifolia with human fish alongside several quark splinters that have been made recently by yours truly," he explained with an ego. "What a blowhard," Dr. Orpington commented with an eye roll, upon which a large flesh-like mass with teeth and eyes where they shouldn't be was born with a subconscious similar to a cat. "I placed it in that lockbox as a mere temporarily holding it, but it seemed to have bonded and made the box a part of its body. After a few more tests and experiments, the Mimikyu was born," he explained further in excitement and self-pride. Egon looked between the octopus and the box, and back at the octopus. "Okay, but how are we going to use this thing?" Professor Cephalopod smiled with his eyes and told him, "I'm glad you asked. So long as the Mimikyu has a record of your scent, it will be completely docile. Anyone else will be ripped to shreds. It's the perfect tool to keep things that we don't have the best confidence in keeping protected, employing modern security science." "How much can it hold?" Izuku inquired. "As much as the box it inhabits." "Can it change boxes?" "I'm not sure on that. The object it inhabits becomes no different from a shell turtle," answered the professor. "How can we get things out of it? Won't it just eat anything that it is given?" Izuku inquired again. The professor then tells him So long as it isn't organic, the Mimikyu can't digest it, which makes it a great organic waste disposal. It can even safely dispose of radiation. As for how to get things out, I implanted it with a form of suggestive telepathy. So long as you think of the item in question, it'll give it to you. He then walked up to the Mimikyu and said, "Observe." Professor Cephalopod then holds out one of the tentacles and the Mimikyu opens up while using its tongue to place a bag of fresh shrimp, tightly sealed up, into said tentacle. To prove his points further, the professor then opened the new bag and began eating one shrimp after another, much to the mixed amazement and disgust of all parties. "How do we take care of it?" Egon wondered aloud. "It only needs a cup of water every month, a consistent temperature, and something that's considered sunlight. Apart from that, they could go years without a meal, but it does eat meat primarily," Professor Cephalopod explains. Egon sits back at his desk, takes off his glasses, and rubs his eye before breathing heavily. He sits there thinking for a while, before placing the glasses back and lacing his fingers, and tells the octopus, "Okay, Professor, stop whatever you're doing and mass produce these things in different sizes." As he nods, the thought crosses his mind, and just before the meeting ends, he says, "Ah yes, there's one more thing." Grabbing the man's attention, he tells him, "If attempting to mold the enemy to bits doesn't work, they have another defense mechanism." Egon raises an eyebrow, thinking aloud, "From what you've told me, I can only guess that the Mimi in the Mimikyu is for its connection to the Mimic in D&D. But what about the cutie part? There must be other defense mechanisms." Professor Cephalopod nods and waves for him to follow while taking the Mimikyu away in a trolley. Izuku and Egon looked up at one another, shrugged, and followed the invertebrate out. After following, they were taken to a testing chamber where the Mimikyu was placed on the center, and all the doctors and professors were safely standing behind the protective observation glass. Professor Cephalopod brought out a shabby-looking robot, and after getting inside the observation room with them, he used a remote controller to make the robot walk over to the Mimikyu, to which he looked at his co-workers and said with a pompous tone, "Observe." The robot then began to beat on the top of the container. The Mimikyu began to rustle and hiss. When it didn't stop, the Mimikyu jumped back and produced a set of long human legs, kitten heel boots, and fishnet stockings. Professor Cephalopod smiles with his eyes and asks, "Impressive, no?" Egon and Izuku just stood there with their mouths open in shock, while Professor Orbiting just glared at her companions with narrowed eyes. After the initial shock washed over, Egon proclaimed, "Impressive? That's 2 major awards in a box. How in the world is that supposed to be a defense mechanism?" "Just watch," Otto assured him. Just then, the Mimikyu ran up to the robot like a drunk person and turned to its side. From there, it brought up its legs and began to produce a flurry of rapid kicks so fast its legs couldn't be seen, and the robot didn't get blasted away during the entire exchange until the last one, where he flew to the other end of the testing room. The Mimikyu then got into a low stance and began to spin like a top, closing the distance, and watching the robot in a whirlwind of legs. And finally, the Mimikyu jumped into the air and came down feet first, puncturing a huge hole clean through the robot's metal body with both heels. Holy! Egon was about to yell a curse word until Izuku cut him off, saying, "Wow! What do you think?" Professor Cephalopods self-assuredly asked the room. Egon had to take a few minutes to process what he saw, taking off his glasses and rubbing his eyes, and after that he said to the octopus, "I think it's crazy and just what we need. Like I said before, you have my permission, just make sure they don't eat anyone by accident." Professor Cephalopod nods with an eye smile and goes to retrieve his creation, leaving a flabbergasted Izuku and Egon with an exasperated Dr. Cluck with them. Chapter 16. New Hire. Okay, people and animals, I'm sure you all know why I've called you here today, Egon stated while slapping the table in a meeting room that everyone was sitting around. "It's your birthday?" Izuku guessed. "No," Egon replied. "It's Christmas?" Otto guessed. "No," Egon replied more firmly. "It's the anniversary of your vasectomy," Cluck asked in a teasing tone. "Are you serious?" Egon irritatedly asked. "You called us here to tone down the crazy things we're making and doing to get the desired results?" Egon guessed while fiddling with his fingers, making everyone tense up. "No, but that's a good point. So long as you guys aren't doing anything illegal or immoral, or anything that will turn into an end-of-world scenario, I don't see any harm in letting you guys do what you want to do," he told them, making everyone sigh, before he slapped the table again and exclaimed, "No! Why I called you here is about our team, or rather, lack of it. We need to hire more people ASAP. We also need organizers and receptionists, and secretary just for you. I'm sure you're just chopping at the bit to do a bit of what we're doing," Cluck says in a tempting tone. Egon sighed, while rubbing his sore neck and saying, "Can't argue with that, but we do need more heads. We have many avenues to cover and only 3 minds to work with. And I can only safely say after a lot of things that we've made so far and were able to sell, we're far more financially stable so as to have more employees." Otto clapped his tentacles and proclaimed, "Wonderful! Let's set up some lectures at different universities and see who becomes interested. After all, what we do here would seem completely bogus to the unwise, so it's perfect to weed out the weak. I'm in complete agreement with you, Professor, but I'll need you and the doctor to step out on this one," Egon tells the 2 animals, who looked at him incredulously. "Izuku and I will take the lead on that," he stated firmly. "What? Why?" Cluck argued back. "The world isn't going to magically be okay with talking animals overnight. It might cause an uproar or something worse," Izuku tells them with a fake musical tone while wiggling his fingers. "What about that Netsu fellow? He's a talking animal that's known to the public," Otto argues with a raised eyebrow. "Principal Nezu is a whole different can of worms," Izuku tells him. "And one we don't have the time to get into," Egon stated firmly. Seeing their unpleasant expressions at them, Egon sighs and offers, "Look, we'll be the ones going to just about every university in Japan, while you 2 will be staying here, looking up any potential employees and set up interviews." The 2 animals thought about it for a while until Otto finally relents and says in agreement, "Well, that is better than trekking around in the hot sun all day." Cluck just shrugged. She didn't want to walk all over the country. Egon nods in approval while saying in an exhausted tone, "Good to hear. Now let's set everything up and get to it. I seriously need a break." Many failed university lectures later, Egon stomps his way out of the emergency exit of a university auditorium. His face was red with a mix of anger and embarrassment, as he practically foamed at the mouth. Running behind him was Izuku with a huge stack of things in his arms. All things used as demonstrations and charts and graphs for lectures. That was the 20th auditorium we were laughed out of. Is it me? Is it you? Is what we're really doing that unbelievable? From a third person's perspective, it kinda does. At least this one apologized and gave us our money back for wasting our time, Izuku admitted while taking all the objects down and counting a stack of cash he pulled out of his pocket. We've been to every university and college in Japan, and not one promising person or a smidge of interest from those $2 half-brain money-wasting idiot leeches. This is hopeless! Egon yelled while dropping to his knees and yelling into the sky. Maybe we should have brought the professor or doctor with us. Nothing tells the truth like hyper-intelligent talking animals. Maybe, Egon admitted while his face was flat on the ground. Also, we still have one more college. Maybe this one will be a winner, Izuku tried to assure him in a chipper tone. Egon sighed deeply, then laments while giving in. Then let's get it over with, so I can go crying to a tub of ice cream and fried chicken. Later, Egon stood before a now empty auditorium with an expression that could only be referred to as contained anguish. Besides him was Izuku, who felt like a clown for suggesting one more. After calming down a bit, his eye twitched. He broke his pointing stick in frustration. After getting that out of his system, he stated, "Well, I guess that's it. What a piss-up." "It could have been worse." Egon groaned and told him, "Thank you for your optimism, Izuku, but it's not appreciated at the moment." After wiping his hands across his face and making a painful sound, he began to pack his belongings while saying, "Let's go back. I want to put myself into a food-based hangover." "What happens if you infuse the two polarities together? Also, what would happen if you turned the frequency into a baseline instead of a positive or a negative? Would the sound waves have any effect on this?" asked a voice behind Egon. Thinking it was Izuku, Egon repressed an urge to growl and told him, "Izuku, I'd love nothing more than to trade theories with you, but right now That wasn't me!" Egon sat up after hearing this and looked into the empty auditorium one last time. He looked closely, narrowing his eyes and putting a hand over them to see better. After scanning the area, he finally came up to one single person left sitting in the now empty hall. "Professor Egon, did you hear me?" Going over to his assistant, Egon mouthed to him, "I think we have a winner." After this, Egon and Izuku invited the only person left to an impromptu interview outside the college's building. There they sat on benches looking across one another on a lone stone table. The person left there was a man in his late 30s wearing typical college attire, with blue eyes and a mild build with a height just under 1.6 meters. His face was angular and his eyes were tired. On his head was not hair, but 5 tube-like attachments that seemed to move on their own accord. 4 of the 5 were very snake-like, but had no features, apart from a mouth in which the teeth were made into lips as opposed to being covered with them. The 5th one was like a tail. Thanks to Izuku, they were able to get a huge chunk of his background for this interview. Thanks to this, Izuku was given a chance to do the interview. After looking it over briefly, Izuku asked him, "So, Mr. Hankayo Suro, am I saying that correctly?" The man nodded. "Well, Mr. Hankayo, I do like what I see so far, though I have a few questions for you, if that's right." Once again he nods. After flipping a page, Egon inquired, "I can't help but notice 2 things. First off, you're well into your 30s and attending college. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Education should never be based on age, only on those willing to learn. But it also says here that you have over a dozen years in the music industry as a singer and performer. What compelled you to take a drastic shift in your career choice? Hankayo blows out the air in a stressed manner before explaining, where do I start? Well, I'm sure you have no idea who I am, but back when I was a singer, I used to go by the name of 5-Chord Gus. Oh, I think I've heard of you. You're from Europe if I'm not mistaken. I know because I heard your renditions of O mio bambino caro by Puccino, if I'm not mistaken. Egon cuts in with recognition. That's me. I used to sing a lot back in my day, Hankayo confirmed as he continued. As for why I chose to pursue a different career choice, especially at this stage of my life, well, I'm sure you know, but I'll tell everything anyway. I want to be completely transparent with you since you're considering hiring me. The two of them looked at one another, nodding, and Izuku prompted him to continue. Ever since I was young, my quirk, 5 living chords, gave me full control, range, and frequency of my vocals. I was a natural prodigy at singing. My parents used this. From the time it manifested to the point my career ended, my parents used my talent to make bank. Every day was always about how I can improve and how I can get even bigger, he said in an irritated and disgusted tone. After breathing to calm himself, he continues saying, anyway, as you can guess, that was a lot of undue stress on a developing child, and my mind was hanging on by a thread for my whole life until I finally snapped. I'm not proud of it, but I killed a lot of people on my very last performance day. Several people in the crowd, a few security guards, my manager, my parents. He stops with a shaky breath and wipes a stray tear. After calming down enough to speak correctly, he tells them, none of those people deserve to die, except for my parents and my manager. I'll never deny my feelings on that, he proclaimed boldly, making the 2 men across from him sweat drop. Hankayo coughs and continues with an apology. Sorry. Anyhow, I don't remember a lot of what happened after that, but I managed to get out of legal trouble by settling outside of court. When my head cleared up a bit, I had a recollection of what I did and checked myself into a mental ward. I got out in a year and had to spend the next few figuring out myself. My entire life, my world revolved around my talent for singing, and nothing else. I had to do what most kids have had their whole lives to do. That's when I realized I had a knack for discovery and knowledge, but didn't like going outside, so I decided to become a researcher and enrolled in university. He takes another shaky breath and hugged himself to calm down before babbling, I'll be honest, my only 2 regrets in life were killing all those people during my during my breakdown, and never helping my 2 older siblings. They were always shunned by my parents, and I was favoured up until the oldest turned 18 and moved out with the middle. I never saw them again. I hope they're happier now than when they were with my parents. God, I missed them so much. I wish I could apologize to them. Hankayo realized what he was saying and doing. He retracted while apologetically stating, I'm sorry, I'm rambling. Izuku waves it off and tells him, No, you needed to get that off your chest. Though, if I may, why come to Japan? Izuku inquired. Hankayo shrugged and tells him, just needed to get away from everything. A fresh start, you know. Izuku nods, looks to Egon, then back to Hankayo while asking, could you give us the room? Hankayo nods and walks to a different spot, allowing the 2 men to speak in semi-privacy. From there, Izuku stands and asks his superior, Professor, are you thinking what I'm thinking? Yes, he exclaimed. So you think we should give this guy a chance and hire him? He asks to make sure. Egon, disappointed in him as he admitted, I was thinking we should stop by my favorite American restaurant, get some new cheese fries, but let's do your thing first. Izuku gives him a half-lidded stare, while Egon shoots back, What? I'm hungry. Izuku shakes his head, walks back over to the man who was now making a flower crown. Mr. Hankayo? Izuku stated, making the man stand up. The teen then stuck out his hand and said with a smile, "Welcome aboard. Once you've graduated, you have a job waiting for you in the Neo Icon Phoenix research lab." Hankayo's face lit up like a Christmas tree, and he exclaimed in an excited voice while shaking his hands hard and fast, "Oh, thank you so much. I'll do my best to make both of you proud. You won't regret this," making the boy and his head tendril shake like crazy. Seeing that, Izuku was stuck. Egon broke it up by saying, "Don't thank us yet. You'll also be having a pleasure of running your division." Hankayo stopped shaking and clutching a nearby tree and asked, looking ready to pass out, My division?" "It can be anything you want," Egon tells him. "Well then," Hankayo thinks for a minute before offering, "how about the sound division?" The two men looked at one another, shrugged, and Egon said, "If that's what you want." After many thanks and handshakes goodbye, Egon and Izuku began walking away from the college, and once they were seemingly far away enough, Egon turns to Izuku and asks, "Should we be worried about the guy who has music-based PTSD making an entire research division solely on the study of sound?" "Let's put a pin in that for now," Izuku tells him with an equally concerned voice. To which Izuku asks, "Should we have told him about his other co-workers?" Egon thinks about it and mentally rejects it, and replies, "Let's cross that bridge when we get to it. Speaking of which, I wonder how they did." Later, at the Neo Icon Phoenix research lab, "You found and set up how many?" Egon exclaimed in shock as he looked over to his two animal employees. "6 in total. That includes your assistant, secretary, and organizer," Professor Cephalopod answered while adding sugar to his coffee in the coffee cart. As Egon stands in shock, Izuku does quick math and corrects him. "Your math is off. It would be 8, not 6. You'll see what I mean at the interviews," Professor Cephalopod says vaguely with a knowing look, making Izuku more concerned than curious. "So, how did your search go?" Dr. Orpington asked while pecking at a loaf of bread. "Like shit," Egon groaned while rolling his eyes. "We did find one." "Wow." Professor Cephalopod resists the urge to chuckle, while Dr. Orpington held nothing back and clucks out loud in laughter. "Hey, don't laugh. We were kicked, laughed at, and chased out of by so many of those uptight universities. We are lucky to just get one." Egon snaps at the two creatures. After sighing in frustration, he states, "Anyhow, let's just hope that these 6 people meet our criteria during interviews. Headhunting is much harder than it looks." Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed these 2 chapters. Sorry about the engine revving in the background. I'm recording this in the day compared to my nighttime recording, like I usually do. So, yeah. Anyway,